The wind doesn't just blow in Chicago, it hunts. It searches for the gaps in your zippers, the holes in your boots, and the places where your skin is thinnest. Elias felt it deep in his marrow, a rhythmic throbbing that told him his toes were no longer his own. He sat huddled against the damp brick of an alleyway, wrapped in a coat that was more thread than fabric. Most people see a beggar and see a statistic. They see a choice. They don't see the man who once taught history to rooms full of bright-eyed teenagers before the medical bills for a wife who didn't survive turned his world into ash. Tonight, the temperature was dropping into the negatives. The air tasted like iron and ice. Elias reached into his pocket, feeling the single, smooth stone he kept there, the only thing he had left of home. His fingers were too numb to grip it. He needed to move or he would become part of the pavement. He dragged his stiff limbs toward the Gold Coast district, where the trash cans of the elite held more warmth than the hearts of the city council. Outside a limestone mansion, a black garbage bag sat perched like a dark cloud. Elias reached in, his breath coming in ragged, white plumes. His hand brushed against something soft. Something heavy. He pulled it out. It was a blue velvet scarf, smelling of expensive sandalwood and vanilla. It was beautiful. It was warm. But as he wrapped it around his neck, his hand hit something hard tucked deep inside a hidden pocket of the fabric. He pulled out a small, leather-bound diary and a heavy gold key. Elias froze. This wasn't just trash. This was a secret. And as he flipped open the first page, a photograph fell out, a photo of a woman who looked exactly like his late wife. But the date on the back of the photo was from yesterday. How could a woman who died 10 years ago be standing in front of this very mansion 24 hours ago? Elias stared at the photograph until his eyes burned. The woman in the picture wore the same blue velvet scarf now wrapped around his neck. She was laughing, her head tilted back, standing under the wrought iron archway of the mansion right in front of him. The resemblance wasn't just close, it was impossible. The same crescent moon scar near her left eye. The same way she gripped her coat lapels. A sudden, sharp clack echoed through the alley. Elias shoved the diary and the key into his inner pocket and ducked behind a row of industrial bins. A heavy steel door at the back of the mansion groaned open. A man in a tuxedo, his face flushed red from wine or rage, stepped out. He wasn't alone. He was dragging a heavy, silver catering tray. With a grunt of disgust, he flipped the tray over, dumping pounds of untouched lobster, glazed duck, and artisanal bread directly into the snow. "Waste," the man muttered, his voice trembling with a strange, jagged edge. "Everything she touched is a waste." The man looked directly toward the bins where Elias hid. Elias held his breath, the cold air burning his lungs like swallowed glass. The man's eyes were glassy, haunted. He didn't see a beggar, he was looking through the world itself. He slammed the door shut and the heavy bolt slid home with a sound like a guillotine. The smell of the food hit Elias. It was a cruel irony, the scent of a king's feast wafting over a man whose last meal was a pack of stale crackers 3 days ago. His stomach roared, a physical pain that rivaled the frostbite. He crawled toward the pile of food, his dignity a distant memory compared to the animal urge to survive. But as he reached for a piece of bread, his fingers brushed the leather diary in his pocket. He pulled it out again. He shouldn't. He should eat and find a subway grate to sleep on. But curiosity is a hunger that food can't satisfy. He flicked to the last entry. The handwriting was frantic, the ink smeared as if by tears. "He thinks he's erased me. He thinks the locks will keep the truth inside. But the key is in the scarf. If someone finds this, please, don't go to the police. Go to the basement." Elias looked at the heavy gold key in his palm. Then he looked at the mansion. The windows were dark, except for one flickering light in the highest attic. Was he a thief if he used a key that was thrown in the trash? Or was he a witness? He stood up, his legs shaking. He didn't go for the food. He walked toward the side gate, the one that led to the service entrance. The gold key fit perfectly into the lock, turning with a silent, buttery smoothness that felt like an invitation to a grave. As the gate swung open, a faint, rhythmic thumping started coming from beneath his feet. It wasn't a machine. It sounded like someone hitting a pipe. Someone who was running out of time. The basement air didn't smell like the rest of the mansion. It didn't smell like expensive wax or aged wine. It smelled of damp concrete, copper, and desperation. Elias moved like a ghost, his tattered boots making no sound on the stairs. The thumping grew louder. He reached the bottom of the stairs and saw a heavy steel door, reinforced with a modern electronic keypad. But next to the keypad was a tiny, old-fashioned keyhole, an override. Elias felt the gold key in his hand. It was cold, pulsing with the gravity of what lay behind that metal. He slid the key in. It turned. The heavy bolts retracted with a sound that felt like a scream in the silence of the house. The door creaked open. The room was small, lit by a single, buzzing fluorescent bulb. In the corner, huddled on a thin mattress, was the woman from the photograph. She wasn't a ghost. She was shivering, her face pale and gaunt, her eyes wide with a terror so profound it made Elias's own hardships feel like a distant dream. She looked at Elias, at his dirt-streaked face, his matted beard, and the blue velvet scarf wrapped around his neck. "You found it," she whispered, her voice a dry crackle. "The scarf." He threw it out because he thought I'd hidden the key in the lining. He didn't realize I'd already dropped it in the trash bag. "Who are you?" Elias stammered, his heart hammering against his ribs. "My name is Sarah," she said, stumbling toward him. "He's my brother. He's been keeping me here for months. He told the world I died in the same accident that took your wife, Elias." Elias stumbled back, his head spinning. "How do you know my name? How do you know about my wife?" Sarah reached into her thin tunic and pulled out a locket. She snapped it open. Inside was a picture of Elias from 15 years ago, standing next to a woman who looked like Sarah's twin. "My sister was your wife, Elias. We were twins. After she died, he lost his mind. He blamed me for being the one who survived. He wanted to keep me here, to preserve the only piece of her he had left. He's been feeding me scraps and waiting for me to fade away so he could finally be alone with his grief." Above them, a heavy floorboard groaned. The tuxedoed man was awake. And he wasn't just walking, he was headed toward the basement door. Elias looked at the frail woman, then at the heavy steel door. They were trapped in a cage of gold and concrete, and the monster was coming down the stairs to finish what he started. "We have to go," Elias hissed, grabbing her arm. "Now." But as they turned to the stairs, the light at the top was blocked by a massive, shaking silhouette. The brother stood there, holding a heavy iron fire poker, his eyes burning with a madness that no amount of money could cure. The brother descended the stairs, his footsteps slow and deliberate. Each step was a death knell. Elias stood his ground, the blue velvet scarf still around his neck, a banner of the truth this monster tried to bury. "You don't belong here, old man," the brother hissed, the iron poker scraping against the stone wall with a high-pitched screech. "You're a ghost of a life that ended 10 years ago. Why couldn't you just stay dead in the snow?" Elias felt a heat he hadn't known in years. It wasn't the heat of a fire, it was the fire of a man who finally had something to lose again. He didn't have a weapon. He didn't have strength. But he had the key. "I've lived in the cold so long I forgot what it felt like to burn," Elias said, his voice dropping to a gravelly growl. "But you've been living in a freezer of your own making." As the brother lunged, swinging the heavy iron, Elias didn't dodge. He stepped in. He used the momentum of his heavy, ice-crusted coat to slam into the man's chest. They tumbled back into the storage racks. Bottles of vintage wine shattered, bathing the floor in deep, blood-red liquid. Elias reached out and grabbed the one thing he knew could end this, the heavy gold key. He didn't use it on a lock. He jammed it into the electronic keypad on the wall and twisted with every ounce of his remaining strength. The circuitry hissed and sparked. The house's security system shrieked, a piercing alarm that cut through the winter night like a siren. "The police are coming!" Sarah screamed from the corner. The brother panicked. The sound of the alarm broke his delusional trance. He looked at his sister, then at the beggar who looked like a vengeful spirit, and he ran. He fled up the stairs and out into the night, disappearing into the white veil of the Chicago blizzard. When the police arrived 10 minutes later, they found Elias sitting on the basement floor, wrapped in a blue scarf, holding Sarah's hand. Fast forward 6 months. The snow had melted, replaced by the lush green of a suburban park. Elias sat on a bench, wearing a clean, simple suit. His beard was trimmed, his eyes clear. Beside him sat Sarah. She had inherited the estate after her brother was captured at the border, but she didn't live in that limestone prison. She sold it. She handed Elias a small, heavy envelope. "You saved more than my life, Elias," she said softly. "You saved our family's soul." Inside the envelope was a title deed to a small, quiet house with a porch and a garden. It wasn't a mansion. It was better. It was a home. As Sarah walked toward her car, Elias reached into his pocket. He pulled out the smooth stone he had carried through the frozen nights and the gold key he had used to break a curse. He walked over to the park's lake and tossed them both in. He didn't need reminders of the cold anymore. For the first time in a decade, Elias wasn't looking for a way to survive. He was finally looking at a way to live. He turned toward his new home, the blue velvet scarf tucked neatly into his bag, a reminder that sometimes, the things the world throws away are the only things worth saving.